This show is listener supported. You can join us and help our show grow to support more adoptees by going to adopteeson.com/partner. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is episode 138, Jennifer. I'm your host, Haley Radke. Before we get to today's episode, I just wanted to pop in and say, wow, the world looks a lot different than it did a mere few weeks ago. I am at home full-time with my 2 kids now. They are out of school. And so you may hear some noises in the background here and there. That's sort of just our new reality. And I wanted to acknowledge that for a lot of you, this is a really, really, really challenging time. I know that there are those of you who have lost jobs, that have been struggling with your own health, and you're afraid of what that might mean. I know there are those of you who are in quarantine and self-isolating like we are. I know there's those of you who wish your community was doing those things, but instead you see people doing things that you think don't seem very safe at this kind of time. I see all of those things happening. I also know there's those of you who are frontline workers, and that means so many different things: medical workers, grocery store workers, delivery drivers, people in restaurants who are still doing takeout orders for us. I mean, there's all sorts of jobs and things that you are doing to keep the rest of us home safe or healthy. And I'm so thankful for your service. And so even though these are really, really challenging times, we are going to try and keep things status quo here as much as possible. I'm still trying to record from home, even though you may hear my kids in the background on occasion. I'm still trying to keep our adoptee community connected. And now more than ever, with so many of us experiencing isolation, I feel like virtual connection is like so vastly more important even than it was a few weeks ago. So with all those things in mind, Adoptees On is going to do our very best. I'm going to do my very best to keep content like this coming. Also, just want to say that I recorded this episode, I think it was the beginning of February. And then we were going to release this episode, and there was a tornado right near where Jennifer lives. And so we were fearful for her and worried about her, and she's okay. So we pressed pause and held this episode. Circumstances have been changing so rapidly for all of us. And I still really want you to hear Jennifer's story. And you know, as I do, right? When circumstances change, then things we have talked about hopefully won't sound out of date. Hopefully some of the exciting things Jennifer has planned will still happen. There might be time changes and things, but as always, if you follow along on social media, you'll get up-to-date info on those things that she's got planned. And there's so many adoptees doing good work, you guys. And I just want to keep highlighting you. And if there is something that you're wanting to share with the adoptee community, if you have a passion to connect adult adoptees, you can, reach out. I am working at limited capacity, so I will do what I can to share. But I just want you to know that I am here. I'm doing my best. I am trying so hard to keep these voices coming to you every week so that we can still have our usual podcast date every week. I don't take for granted that I know I'm a part of some of your routines, and I want to keep showing up for you. With all that being said, let's get to today's episode. Today, Jennifer, Dyan Ghoston, is here to share her story with us. Jennifer tells us about the moment she opened her original birth certificate, her search for her biological family, and what reunion with extended family really looks like for her today. We wrap up with some recommended resources, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Jennifer Dyan Ghoston. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Haley. It's so good to be a part of your podcast.
Well, first of all, I can't believe it's taken me so long because we met a couple years ago in real life and you brought me a copy of your book and you signed it for me. And that was just so fun. It was really, it was the Adoptees On meetup in San Francisco. And that was like, great.
Yeah, it was so good to meet you in person. So often we meet adoptees online, through social media, and we never get to see each other face to face. So that was pretty cool. The May of 2018, yes, that was great meeting you.
Yeah, so it's almost been 2 years now. Wow. I would love it if you would start the way we always do. And would you share some of your story with us?
Yes, I born in 1964. I was separated at birth and placed into foster care, where I would remain for 2 years. And in 1966, I was adopted by the Ghoston family, my mother and father. I was permanently placed with them, and it was finalized in 1967 with an adoption decree and an amended birth certificate. And so my journey with a new family started at that time. And so through the years, I thought about what it meant to be adopted, but then it was just here and there. It wasn't really solid in me that there was, perhaps a problem with being separated from the original family. I always knew I was an adoptee. My mother told me that the social worker had advised her or guided her that it would be good to talk to me about it age appropriate through the years so that it wouldn't be a secret. And so she followed that guidance. And I think that's like a really good thing for an adoptee to know, or not, let's say not know throughout the years growing up. So I didn't really think it was a big deal, the age of 12 kind of sticks out to me as a time when I was curious, a little more curious than I had been, say, in the past about, who is my birth mother, and my mother kind of made it clear that that wasn't something that I should be interested in. And so I tucked it away, for years and years. And in fact, she died in 2002. My dad died in 1991. And so it would be several years after my mother died that I would even say, this is important, to search for my original family. So that's like the short version of my story.
Well, I find it really unusual that the social worker gave your adoptive parents that advice because I didn't think that was happening in the 60s. So good for her.
Yeah, that's what I say. I think that's commendable. And I think the other thing that the social worker told her that was pretty good advice was that my name given at birth, Bonnie, should continue to be a name that was used. As my parents introduced my new name of Jennifer. And so even to this day, there are plenty of circles that know the name Bonnie throughout the years of my growing up, which is pretty cool.
I saw a part of your story in the Gene Strauss documentary, A Simple Piece of Paper. So in that, you have a party because you're getting your original birth certificate. So we're fast forwarding a few years here, but can you tell us about that moment, getting your OBC?
Yeah, wow. 2012 was January 2012 was the time of the party. And let me just back up a little bit. So I applied for my original birth certificate, as many adoptees in Illinois did at that time, in 2011. And so having met Jane Strauss through the American Adoption Congress, I had been to a couple of conferences and met her, and knowing she's a filmmaker and knowing that she was really setting her sights on, Illinois, with the new law changing. And so we discussed the fact that perhaps I would be one of the adoptees receiving the original birth certificate that would open it on film, being filmed opening this document. So the more I thought about it, I just thought it was like a pretty big deal, a big celebration that I wanted the adoption community to come out and be a part of. And all of it had something to do with this momentous event. And so I decided on the party, January 15th, 2012. And the adoption community came out, other adoptees who had already received their birth certificates came out, and family and friends. It was just a really good time. And so, I opened it for the first time, see my OBC for the first time. And I just remember seeing the name Bonnie was so emotional. I still get emotional about it because that was true. My birth date was true. So some of these things that I have been told through the years were in fact true because they were on this document. Mm-hmm. And perhaps most importantly was seeing my birth mother's name, seeing her handwriting. Of course, that was a big piece in helping me to search for birth family members, to search for her and everybody else. And so it just felt good to finally have some information that for years I just had no way of getting. So that was a very big day.
Before we go to your search, can you just tell us, your son was there at the party watching you open your original birth certificate, and your son is, your first biological relative that you had in your life. And, can you talk about how that was for him and your experience of him seeing you have this piece of paper?
Yeah, so my son at the time was 22. Well, he was going to be 22 that year. And so he had been with me through this journey that kind of started in 2010 with me, deciding, like, without a doubt that I was going to be on this search. And so I wanted his blessings, but I certainly wanted him to kind of follow me along, like just be side by side with me. So he wasn't in the dark about anything. So when this birth certificate opening happened and he's there, I think his feeling was, wow, all these people have come out to see this. And it clicked, I think, when everybody just kind of gasped right before I opened it and said that he was the only person that I knew to be biologically related to me all these years. And I think it clicked for him with how the audience was responding. Because, like, he's always told me, because he's always known I was adopted, but he's always told me that he doesn't think about it. It's just, let's just go on with life. And it wasn't a big deal. And yet I think that day he made a connection. And fast forwarding, he would make even bigger connections to the importance of it,
I always think about that because I have 2 young sons myself, and because of what I do, I talk about adoption so frequently in front of them, not necessarily including them in the conversation, but, my husband and I might be talking about some interview I did or have, some book I'm reading or anything. And so they're very aware of it. And so I'm always curious about how our other, family members kind of take this in. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so you have her name on the birth certificate, your first mother's name, and you decide not to read it out at the party. Can you tell us why, and then what you did next now that you have this information?
So I felt, because I didn't know her. So I didn't know if she was a person that would want anonymity, or, I just didn't know how she would feel about what I was doing so publicly, I know some people are very private, and even though it may not have been a secret, among family, my birth family, it still didn't mean that she wanted it, on the front page of the paper, or in a film. So I just felt that was not appropriate. Yeah. And so, I just felt that was not a good idea. I did show my birth certificate to probably everybody in the room. So it wasn't like people left there not knowing her name. Everybody knew her name. So, but I just thought I shouldn't put it on film in that kind of a public way. So I enlisted the aid of Melissa Mitchell as my search angel. She was in attendance at the party. And let me just say, those in the adoption community who may not know who she is, she was very instrumental in having the law changed, her along with, at the time, State Representative Sarah Feigenholtz. And I'm talking about over a decade battle with getting this law changed. So I became just very close with the both of them. And so I asked Melissa to, help me search. And so by that evening, she shot me an email having my birth mother's name and told me that she had passed in 1996. But let's get started on other family members, which is what we did. That's kind of how that took off with finding my maternal birth family.
I'm sorry to hear that. How have you processed that? You kind of share in your book a little bit about, waiting to search because your adoptive mother kind of expressed that this was not something she was comfortable with. And so you had these curious thoughts every once in a while, but you just kind of put that to the back burner. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like that's kind of what you were expressing in your book. And so, your OBC, the open records, kind of came too late for you to actually connect with her. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that I did right around 2009, 10, and 11 I just read all I could get my hands on, The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Fessler and so many other books talking about the birth moms. And what I learned started leading me to believe that you may not find them alive. You may just not have an opportunity to reunite with them. But there are a whole lot of other people that are possibly still very much alive. And you want to connect with them. They're still your birth family, And so I kind of focused on siblings. Like I remember thinking, I wonder if I have siblings, and nieces and nephews and cousins, first cousins, because I grew up very close to my first cousins. They were almost like siblings in a way. And so I just felt like if I don't find my birth mother, I'm going to be okay. Like that, it's a bigger picture.
Okay, so you had really thought about this ahead of time, like that was already a possibility on the table. So it didn't come as a total shock to you when you got that information.
It really didn't. And I remember feeling, oh wow, I do remember feeling that, like, oh wow. But because the other thing I thought is that's such a young life. My birth mother died at 49. So I just remember thinking also on those terms, like she was gone too soon, But I had really prepared myself for that outcome. There's no doubt about it. And Melissa she's kind of like me. Let's just keep moving. Let's keep moving with what we can find and what we can do. And so her energy also helped me to kind of stay focused and not be down about it.
I love that. It's really, I think it's kind of good advice for those of us that haven't, searched yet or have that on the radar to just think about those possibilities ahead of time, because it sounds like you were really prepared. Okay, so what do you want to tell us about your search and what you found and where you are? And I'll let you take it from here to kind of lead us into that part of your story.
Yeah, we're still in 2012, and I want to say it was about a week based on the information Alicia gave me that I was able to find, because my birth name was Bonnie Upshaw. So Upshaw is the name I'm working with. And I want to say it was about a week that I found maybe 3 or 4 Upshaw families. And as I eliminated 1, 2, 3, I think number 4 was the Upshaw family I was looking for. And that would be an aunt. And, I go to her door, which is depicted in the film, a simple piece of paper. And she's a real kind of suspicious person, like, who are you? What is this about? And I was very nervous and I just said it. I'm a trust guide. I'm Wanda Upshaw's daughter. And she just put her hands to her face and said, I see it. I see it. I see the Upshaw all in you. And I just remember feeling that, wow, they knew about me, like all these years, these 40-something years, they knew I was out here somewhere because Wanda had talked about me all these years. So my aunt just embraced me and, went into her home and she started pulling out obituaries and so many people had passed, my birth mother's brothers and, her parents, like just so many people. And I just remember feeling good about the fact that my aunt, Juanita, knew about me. And my brother, she reached out to him. He knew about me and cousins. And it was just a good feeling that I hadn't been a secret. I just remember that was just so powerful. And that I was out here somewhere and that finally they were able to put a face to this person that had been talked about all these years, So talked to my brother over the phone and we arranged to meet that same evening. And, it was good. It was just really good to just one by one kind of meet everybody over, I would say, a couple of weeks. I met my brother's kids and then we had a party that March. And that was probably the first time that the family I grew up with was able to meet my birth family. So that was a really nice get together. Yeah. So
what does reunion look like for you now? What are we, like 7 or 8 years later? What did those relationships kind of look like in your day-to-day life? Are you still connected with family from your maternal side?
I am. But wow. I will say, I will say that the honeymoon stage is definitely over. That's like to all the listeners, that's a real thing, And I think it's because once the dust settles, they don't know you, you don't know them, you don't have history, you don't have history. And even going forward, making memories is still tricky because so many years have gone by. But I am in touch with my nieces and nephews. I'm closer with some over others. Yet I feel like if I called any number of them, any one of them, they would receive me. They would answer my call. We could talk. But I liken it, and I was talking to an adoptee about this recently, I liken it to any family you're in. You're going to be closer with some people than you are others, even though, you're all first cousins or even your siblings, that's just the way it is. And so I don't feel bad about it. I do think, and this is just me because I've never talked to my birth family about it, I do think for me, it has everything to do with not having history. That's just for me. And I think when you have history, growing up together, all the things that families do through, each decade, it's a foundation, that you build along with being biologically related. Yeah, that's just how it is.
So you mentioned that they had known about you all along. And what a comfort that is to not surprise someone of your existence at the door. And as an aside, you were door knocking. I mean, I know you were a police officer and you had experience doing that, but I'm like, whoa, I can't picture going to someone's door and being like, hey, I'm, someone's daughter. Anyway, that's just an aside. But
Right.
what about that, knowing that they thought of you through the years? And do you think that helped kind of, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Soften the blow of this surprise on the
Yeah,
doorstep?
absolutely. I say it softens a fall, of anything that maybe you learn that feels funny. Yeah, and I really didn't expect that. I really expected to be surprised, or for maybe a couple people knew, maybe one person knew. And I certainly wasn't sure when my aunt answered the door if she knew. Like I didn't. So that was a real pleasant surprise because it actually gave her so much relief because she was, like I say, she's very suspicious and, who are you and what is this about kind of, person. And so for her to know gave her a lot of relief too, because she knew, she had heard through the years, she knew. It made her feel a lot better. Like, and then for me to look, so much like the family, she just felt so much better. That gave her like some comfort, like, yeah. I don't think I would have been, like, I just wouldn't have been surprised to have not been known about, but it is nice to have been known about. Very nice.
Okay, let's switch over to paternal side. And there was no father's name on your birth certificate. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, which I think was really common back in the day. They often, if it was unmarried parents, they would often leave the father's name off the birth certificate, even if the mother requested it on. I think that was fairly common practice. So that's just an aside. But oh my goodness. Did you do DNA testing? Did you search for your father's side? What happened with that?
So it's kind of a funny story. Before I did the DNA test, I tried to do some searching on my own, and I asked people, and I remember asking one guy who lived in an area that I believed he might have lived in. Well, actually, it was an area that my birth mother lived in, and I figured maybe she met him in that area. So,
oh, wait. Okay. Did her family tell you? Did your maternal family tell you who they thought? Like, did they know who your biological father was?
So they did not know. But as I'm looking for my paternal side, I get information of someone, a woman, who might know. So I call her up and I told her, listen, I was adopted and I'm trying to find my birth father. And my birth mother's name was Wanda Upshaw. And she was like, wait a minute, Wanda Upshaw? She lived right next door to me. So she said, my girls were her best friends. And I was like, totally floored because I didn't expect that.
Well, I jumped right to DNA testing because I was like, ooh, this is such an awkward question. I don't know that I would ask my aunt or whatever. So, okay, I love this. Detective skills. Keep going.
So, yeah, this woman, Lillian, is her name, and she just stopped me in my tracks about the whole birth father thing. She didn't know who he was. But she was like, I know who Wanda is, and I know that I remember her going away in 1964, and everybody pretending that she wasn't pregnant, but we knew she was pregnant, and like it was just something just to talk with her, and then to meet her girls, which were my birth mother's best friends, and of course they knew who my birth father was because they were all young teenage girls, and so, but had been so long ago. So one of the girlfriends was like, I'm not for sure about his real name. I know we call him, she gave the nickname, and she gave me as much as she could remember. But just wasn't enough. It was kind of a common name, the name of William Gilmore. And so I kept falling short on, finding out who he was. So I kind of gave it a rest, 5 years to be exact. And I decided I'm just going to do this DNA test, which I did in 2017, like May. And within 6 weeks, I got these results back, and it matched to my birth father's first cousin. And he responded back right away. And see, I had bits and pieces from the girlfriend, which I told him. And so he was like, oh, this has got to be legit. We kind of know in the adoption community, the DNA is legit, but a lot of times people aren't that familiar. And it's funny because he submitted his DNA that year in 2017, earlier that year, because his wife was working on a family tree and things of that nature. And so that's how he got into this whole Ancestry.com, but not really being familiar with it, and certainly not expecting an adoptee to call him and say, your first cousin is my birth father,
Because you waited 5 years. So if you had done it 5 years ago, you wouldn't have had that match.
Absolutely, Haley. And that's why I said sometimes we beat ourselves up about not doing things timely, so to speak, or at a certain time. But there's so many things going on. There's a lot of inner workings that we don't even have knowledge of. And I certainly would have preferred the outcome I got. I wouldn't have wanted to have submitted the DNA and had to wait 5 years, So I think, timing is so unpredictable when it comes to these things. So, I reunited with that side, and I met 2 aunts and cousins, and a little different situation because they didn't know anything about me. They suspected that some of the things that I had learned about him could have been true, because I had heard from my aunt, Juanita, that my birth mom had told him she was pregnant, and that he and his mom, this was in 1964 while she's still pregnant, went to her home, and said, we'll take care of the baby. And my maternal grandmother said, there is no baby. I don't know what you're talking about. And that was the end of that. And so when I shared that with my paternal family, they were like, that sounds like something that she would do, that my paternal grandmother would do, because that's just who she was when it came to children. And so who knows, I didn't know, but those are some of the things that were shared with me.
So was your father, your biological father, had he already passed away as well?
He did. He passed in 1990. Okay.
I'm sorry. Do you still have connections with people on the paternal side?
I do. And I'm probably the closest to my birth father's younger sister. And I visited with her. In fact, I always share this story. That same year, 2017, that I found everybody, she invited me to her home for Thanksgiving. And so, I live in Nashville and she's still in Chicago. And so I said, yeah, that'd be great. Pack up my dog and we'll head over there. And so I remember her saying, once I got to Chicago, she said, well, because I was staying somewhere on the south side. She lives near downtown. And she said, well, what are you going to do with your dog while you're over here, for Thanksgiving? I said, well, she'll be fine. I'll just leave her there and give her food and water. She'll be fine till I get back. She said, no. Bring your dog with you. Your dog is welcome. I couldn't, nobody has ever invited my dog over to Thanksgiving dinner. And we had a really good time. She's really a really wonderful person. I tell people that I think that my acceptance has everything to do with her love for her brother. Yeah, she was very, very close with her brother.
Wow. So you have heard from the paternal side. There is a grandmother that wanted to keep you in the family. In your book, you share a little bit that your first mother expressed to relatives that she wishes she could have kept you. Can you talk a little bit about that, knowing that you were wanted, what that means to you?
What comes to my mind is the fact that the 60s was a time of secrecy and shame around the unmarried, teenage pregnancy. Like that was really shameful to the family, to many families. So on one hand, I understand the dynamics that were going on. My mother pregnant at 16, and how her mother felt about what does this mean for her and her getting her education and, being so young and feeling that the best situation was for me to be placed for adoption. Like, I get that. And to learn that a 16-year-old doesn't want to give up her baby, I get that too. Like, that's hard. And I feel like you have a relationship, over 9 months of carrying a child, there's a relationship there. And to expect a woman to not be able to keep her baby, I just, like, that's so deep. So I understand both sides. I feel that for me, wanting to be kept by my birth mother, like, yeah, she would want to keep me. Like, that's what I would think she would want. And I do know that there are birth mothers that don't want to keep their children. I've heard those stories as well. So for me, yeah, I feel good about wanting to be kept. I feel very good about her talking about me. I think she was trying to work through her grief about it, and not have to suffer alone in it,
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what that was about. And then also, I think, because she did say to my aunt, please don't change your name. Please keep the Upshaw name, because nobody else had the Upshaw name, because she'll come back to you. Like, she said that to her as if she felt that I want her to have somebody she can find, like she was really thinking about that. So that means a lot. That means a lot to know that. And, it's interesting because, I married in 1988, and my husband at the time was born a day before me. He was born May 2nd of 64. And what's interesting is that his mother, who I'm very close with still now to this day, was 16 years old when she was pregnant with him. And we're all from Chicago. We're all from, it's interesting in the sense that it was never a question of her keeping her baby. At the same time, like, literally within the same 24 hours that my birth family was making an exactly different decision. So it's putting us back into that time with all the secrecy and shame about a teenager being pregnant, but very different decisions were made. So when I learn about my birth father's mother's feeling, I'm like, she was like, this other mother, my mother-in-law, at the same time, she's feeling the same way, so it's interesting. I think, that's one thing. I really wish I could have had a conversation with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. I don't feel like her decision or her thought process about it was wrong, but I would like to know a little bit more about what made her feel so strongly when other families I know of didn't feel so strongly, under the same circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, those are interesting questions to ponder, right? And it's like answers we won't get. But I'm always curious about those kinds of things. I want to talk a little bit more about your book and your work in just a minute, but I'm curious. So you were adopted into a Black family, and I feel like I don't see a lot of examples of that, and it's probably just the circles I'm in. that there's so much transracial adoption. And, you know, we've had other transracial adoptees on the show, and they talk about, you know, the complexities of growing up in a white neighborhood and feeling othered and those kinds of things. But what was your experience with that?
Yeah, it's funny because my adoptive family, the family I grew up with, I fit right in. Like my first cousins and I look alike. And so I don't have that layer that some adoptees have of not like totally not fitting in physically. And so I find it so interesting. I think another dynamic though is when through the years, people would say, oh, I knew that was your cousin, or I knew that you all were related. But they couldn't possibly really know that, you know, because I wasn't biologically related. You know, they're looking at how we resemble each other. Mm-hmm. So when that would come up, I guess my point is when that would come up, I would just kind of laugh to myself because you say that, but in fact, that's not true. You know, It's not true that I look like them because we're biologically related. You know, so it would always be kind of a trigger that I am adopted, you know, like, yeah. So it wasn't a bad thing, but I just remember being triggered like, yeah, I am adopted, you know, even though I look so much like everybody. And if they hadn't said that, we just would have, you know, just carried on. And I wouldn't have even be thinking about, oh yeah, I am adopted though.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that part of your experience. And let's go ahead and do our recommended resources. And I was so honored that you gifted me a copy of your book, and I really enjoyed reading it. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I love especially how you ground your story throughout the years in what is happening, you know, in current events, culturally and politically. And, you know, being from up in Canada, I don't know a whole ton about those things. So I learned a lot reading your story. And even though, you know, your search and those kind of things, most of it happens towards the very end. There's this really interesting thread that you weave through just about being an adoptee in regular life. And I love how you tell stories about your work as a detective in Chicago. And I mean, oh my gosh, it's very, very interesting. So I know you guys will love it. But Jennifer, I just saw that there is something about a play called Meant to Be. Can you tell us about that? That's really exciting.
Well, yeah. So I didn't want to write another book about my adoption journey. I thought, I want to present the rest of my story in a different way. Okay. And so, you know, the book leaves off with my reunion on my maternal side. So I said, why not do a theater play to finish the story? And so, yeah, I'm producing Meant to Be, based on the truth so far, here in Nashville. In fact, we're having a theater reading May 17th of this year. And I invite the adoption community to come out and if you're in Nashville or the surrounding areas, please, you know, shoot me an email. Tickets are free for this reading, and hopefully I can put the play on in November of this year, first here in Nashville and then probably in Chicago next year. But yeah, that's what I'm excited about. And I have 11 amazing actors who are going to tell the story.
Wow, I love that. I should have said that. So your book is called The Truth So Far, A Detective's Journey to Reunite with Her Birth Family. And then the play is called Meant to Be. Wonderful. That was so exciting. I love that. How did you transition from writing your memoir to writing a play? That seems like very different writing skills.
It is so different. Yeah, so one of my readers, and I just want to say I've been amazed that most of my readers have not been a part of the adoption community, which I think is really good news for us, because that means that people are listening to our story and just being totally caught off guard by the fact that so many of us don't have access to original birth certificates, for example, or like New York just having the law change. Like people outside of the community are like, what? Like they can't even believe it. And so one of my readers early on, back in 2015 when I self-published the book, he read it cover to cover so fast. He was a coworker of mine with the police department. And so when he and I talked, I said, would you consider writing a play? Because he's a writer. And so he said, he said, I'd be honored. And so as he started bringing scenes to me, I was like, this is good. And so then I, did some scenes and we just collaborated over the entire year last year and finished it. So yeah, I co-wrote it, I should say. But I knew that, like, based on the feedback he gave me about the book, that he got it. Not being a part of the adoption community, he got it. He got the story. So yeah, that's how that happened. But it was totally different from writing the book. Writing a play, because you just got to capture so much in this short period of time, and then, and then you got to kind of let the actors know what emotion goes where, and but it's been fun. I like challenges, so it's been good.
Well, that's another part of your memoir. Like you really do take us on this emotional journey, as well as learning with you some of the different spirituality things that you've kind of learned over the years through reading different thought leaders in that area, and just really, really interesting. I just want to read one sentence from your book before we do your recommended resource, because I think this is so profound and I think people need to hear it. So
okay.
This is from you, from your words. I believe that the right time to search is when you're ready, no matter the reasons, and you don't have to make any apologies about it. I think that's pretty wise.
Yes. And, like people, I get emails and calls from people who have read my book or see me on, social media. And I'm always moved by the fact that it's either one or two things. Your story resonated with me because it parallels my experience, or I'm ready. And what do I do next? And I'm always like, that's why I'm even on social media, because these people I wouldn't have not met any other way, And I think that when you're ready, you reach out to resources and all of us should continue along the way for the support you need. I know I certainly got the support going to conferences and just being a part of the adoption community. Mm-hmm. And one thing I really wish, I don't know if I put this in my book, I think I might, no, I don't think I did, but what I wish I could have done sooner rather than later was to be connected to the adoption community. That's like the only, if there's any regret, that's the only regret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very powerful. As we started our interview, right, saying we met in person and just how powerful it is being with other adoptees in person. And of course, social media is a great connector. So, okay, what did you want to recommend to us today?
I love podcasts. I certainly love reading books. But if I had to choose one, it would have to be Who Am I Really? By Damon Davis. And those, I think I've listened, just like with your podcast, I think I've listened to nearly every episode, and I'm just so moved by people sharing. I think it takes a certain amount of courage to just come forth and share a story with the world, basically. And so I enjoy Damon's podcast just as well as I do yours.
Thank you. And you were on Damon's show, just like I was. So you were on episode 40, and it's called I Mattered Throughout the Years. So if you want to hear more of Jennifer's story, you can read her memoir, The Truth So Far, and you can go listen to her episode of Who Am I Really? And I was on Damon's show. He invited me so kindly to be his 100th episode, which is just such a huge honor. I really respect his work. And the more adoptee voices out there, the better, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I too, I love the intimacy of podcasts, even though like right now it's just the two of us, we're just on the phone chatting and yet, we're going to invite a third person to listen in on our conversation while they're doing something like, I don't know, commuting or washing the dishes or walking their dog, and they'll feel a part of the conversation. And I think that's the extra special thing about podcasts versus reading a book or watching a documentary. But I think podcasts are kind of special in that way. So
they are very special. And, like just hearing a person's voice tell their story, I think is even more powerful than, certainly is got a powerful aspect versus reading it. I like to hear people's voice telling the story. So yeah, the podcast is amazing.
Well, that's why I love, if I have been, oh my goodness, this feels like really extra, but I love that I have the opportunity to speak to an author like yourself. And then when I read your book, I can read it in your voice in my head. I can hear you reading it to me. So I do. I have that same thing about voices. Well, I thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your story with us and some very insightful thoughts. Where can we connect with you online?
So I am on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Jennifer Dyan Ghoston, and I think it's Jennifer Ghoston on Twitter. And my email is jenniferdyan@aol.com. And what else? Website, jenniferdyanghoston.com. So I invite people to reach out to me via email. I get a lot of correspondence that way.
Okay. And your website has info about your play, so people can follow there as well, to make sure they know when they can go see it in real life. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting.
Yeah. The I keep the website updated. Right now, I think it just is talking about the theater reading in May. But yeah, that's the best place to go. And I do share the process. I've had a lot of people ask me about the process of writing. So I share the process this time of creating a theater play. So I do that mostly on Instagram, so.
Love it. Thank you. We will definitely follow you over there.
One thing I wanted to say, I think it's kind of important. One can have wonderful parents, a great childhood, and be surrounded by amazing family members. I mean, that was me. Feeling love, giving love, and still want to know their original family. I don't know if adoptees, I think we kind of get that, but I just wanted to share that with your audience.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haley. I really appreciate you and what you do. You're such an added value to the adoption community.
Now, more than ever, it is so important that we stay connected. So I'd love to make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast so you can keep in touch and keep up to date with all the new episodes that we'll be bringing out. And if you want this podcast to keep going, I would ask that you would go to adopteeson.com/partner, and you can find out all the ways you can support the show there. And we are still making our Adoptees Off Script podcast for Patreon supporters, and that has been a good outlet for us to talk about a lot of our reading club books that we are doing right now for our reading challenge. And in March, we did poetry, which was so fun. And so we'll be releasing that episode on Monday for our reviews of all the poetry books that Carrie and I read. And yeah, I'd love to have you join us. Adopteeson.com/partner. Thank you so much for listening. Please take good care of yourself. I am thinking of you. I know this is a challenging time, and just know that you are not alone. Let's talk again next Friday.